Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us in this beautiful day. It's the second day of the World Green Economic Summit. And of course, we've been hearing distinguished speakers putting their insights and having a great added value to discussions around decarbonization. In today's panel, in this panel, we're going to talk about the role of youth when it comes to decarbonization and when it comes to sustainability. I'm happy to have Mr. Majd Fayyad, DSM Strategy and Policy Lead, Dubai Supreme Council of Energy. And thank you so much, Lydia, for joining us, Lydia Sanz Lozano, Co-Vice Chair of Programming, Student Energy Summit 2023. It's a very interesting topic today when we discuss youth and what do they mean when it comes to sustainability and climate change. So let me start with you, Majd. To what extent do you think that the youth can take the lead when it comes to climate change efforts compared to older generations? And I consider myself from the older generation.
No, I think we're all youth on the panel. Definitely the definition of youth varies across different organizations, but I think what I like to think, anyone is considered youth under the age of 40. So this is what I like to think.
Good news.
Yes. So first, thank you. Thank you, Maya. I'm very pleased to be part of the World Green Economy Summit and to talk about this very important topic, the youth role in sustainability and climate action. So as you mentioned, youth are uniquely positioned actually to lead sustainability and climate change efforts compared to older individuals, and there are several reasons. And if you look at the psychological traits demonstrated by youth, you will know the reason. The first trait, which is extremely important, is optimism. Youth tend to be more optimistic. You know, they believe that they can make change. If you look at the numbers, a study by Yale found that more than 70% of young adults believe that climate change can be mitigated if proper action is considered. And if you look on the opposite side about older generations and older people, they are more resigned and more pessimistic about the impact of climate change. So this sense of optimism is critical. This positive outlook to life is very important. The belief that they can create change is very important. A second aspect, which is also very important, is risk-taking. We all know that youth tend to be more of risk-takers and generating ideas on different topics, and sustainability is definitely an area which needs new ideas, needs new innovations. Actually, youth are 60% or even 70% more likely to engage in entrepreneurship in innovative solutions related to sustainability. And if you look at the companies that are created by youth, more than 50% of them focus on climate action. So it is you will see that youth are at the forefront of the climate action. They really consider sustainability and climate action as part of their business models. And this is why we need to encourage youth to take these leadership positions. The third aspect, which I want to highlight, is digital fluency. We all know that we live in a digital world, right? Digital technologies are increasing exponentially, the use of social media, and we all know that youth are connected to social media. They have a special connection. And this connection gives them power. You know, we've seen it with global campaigns done by youth, that they can create impact, they can shape up public opinion, they can do a leading role in awareness as well. So these traits, the optimism, the risk-taking, and digital fluency all together position youth at really the forefront of leading climate action.
And let's hear from Lydia, your insights, especially with your experience as the Co-Vice Chair of Programming Student Energy Summit 2023. What can you tell us about youth perspective and insights around climate change?
Thank you, May, and thank you, Majd, also for your insights today. I think it's so important, the energy that young people transmit in these climate spaces. You know, as someone who's been in this climate space for 5 years and is usually the youngest person in the room, I think the energy that we bring is contagious. It's contagious in the sense that we come with a willingness to listen, to act, to be proactive, to engage in dialogue. And this is something that's growing, and it's growing over time, and it's contagious in the sense of what we are able to take on, but also what other young people are able to take on in this space. And I think coming from a perspective of organizing conferences as well, is that we also have a responsibility as to how we can make this space as inclusive and as meaningful as possible for young people to make. Because when we're talking about the energy that young people bring to the table, is how we can harness that energy so that it actually does something, and how that leads into policy making when we're talking about climate change. And what we see is drafted in the COP28 outcomes, how do we see young people's voices being reflected in that, and how do we see actual tangible projects coming out of a certain of those decisions. So I think, to answer your question, as young people, we see that we have a responsibility to make a change. We have a responsibility to engage with each other and policymakers and representatives of organizations, and summits such as these, and also conferences that are led and created by youth, are ever so central into shaping a very powerful narrative that's collaborative, that's energizing, that's positive, that's educated, but that's also financed, and it's supported through the very real challenges that we young people face in not always being able to be present at negotiation tables.
So Majd was talking about digital social platforms. And I believe today that the young generation have a higher voice and a heard one, especially on the digital platforms that seem to be changing the world. To what extent, Lydia, do you think that we can do more for the young generation, for their voices to be heard?
Yeah, and this is definitely something that we talk amongst ourselves as young people, is how do we utilize that greater interconnection that we have thanks to social media, but how do we make that come across in something that's actionable and something that makes a change? So, for example, as young people, when we're in conferences, how do we use our platform to share our experiences and bring those voices back to our communities? So, how do we document those experiences? How do we document those experiences when we're at a negotiation table, when we're talking about the policies we want to implement? But how is that also influenced by the people that we talk to back home? So I think media, in a sense, plays an active role in two different senses. In the sense of creating that greater connection across young people that we want to see, but also as in a way for us to reflect and utilize that power, because social media is very strong in showing what we want to become and how empowered we want to be. But policy making gets done into very certain spaces. And how can we target those? And how can we ensure that what's discussed on the table is reflective of communities, is reflective of young people in the front lines of climate change? How do we use media to translate their voices into climate space, into negotiation? And how do those policies then are later transmitted back so that communities can actually understand what it is that's being talked about at these international conferences that they perhaps don't necessarily have the access to? So I think it goes both ways a little bit.
I loved your insights, Lydia, and actually that brought a question to my mind. Majd, we need more like Lydia in leadership positions, and especially when it comes to positions that have to do with climate change and energy transformation and decarbonization. What should governments do globally to have more of the young generation taking a leadership role when it comes to these initiatives and to building strategies to protect our planet?
Brilliant question. And I think if you look at the UAE, you will see that the UAE government has set a global benchmark in terms of involving leadership and promoting leadership in governance. An example would be Her Excellency Sheikha Mohammad who became Minister of Youth at the age of 22. And this really demonstrates that the UAE government is committed to empowering youth. And you will see that there is also several initiatives within the UAE government, such as Emirates Youth Council, several youth councils, local youth councils across the Emirates. We have also ministerial youth councils as well. All of these councils are created to, one, provide advice or act as advisors to government into issues related to youth, into sustainability, environment, and economy, but also to reach, the outreach, to reach out and engage with youth within companies as well and in the public. I think what is missing is from the private sector side. So if we look at the companies, and we've seen several programs. You can see mentorship programs, training programs, and internship programs. But we want to see more than that. We want to see that the private sector and companies are empowering youth into leadership positions, into decision-making positions, and into boards of companies. Why not? Why don't we have youth as part of the board, you know? If you look at the numbers, you will see that youth are underrepresented in boards. Mostly boards are older individuals, right? And there has been a lot of talk about diversifying boards in terms of race, in terms of gender, and we've seen that there has been progress on the gender side and race. But if you look at the numbers, you will see that less than 3% of board seats of Fortune 500 companies are actually held by individuals less than under the age of 40.
You know what the problem, Majid, is that for them, they look at the young and they think they lack the experience. They want in boards people who are more experienced. And I'm against that because I think we all need fresh perspective. And that fresh perspective would come from someone who is younger than 30 or maybe younger than 20. I don't know. Why should we have a certain age group for people on boards?
I'll give you just a bit of statistics. If you look at the innovators globally, you know, you will find that 15% of the major innovators globally have done their innovations under the age of 30. And 30 to 40% of these innovators have done it under the age of 40. So almost 50% or 60% of the global innovators have created these innovations under this age, you know? I agree, there are several aspects, especially in companies that, in tech companies, for example, in fast-growing companies, you need these fresh voices. But it doesn't have to be full-time board members. You can have advisory boards composed of youth. You can have youth playing shadow roles as part of the boards. And it doesn't have to always be mentor versus mentee, or, you know, sometimes individuals and board members need to also listen to youth, listen to their ideas, listen to their perspectives, and also teach them. And this is the dance, you know, there is a dance here between leading and following, and when you can lead and when you can follow. And I think if youth really understand that, and also board members and companies understand that, they will benefit from it.
I would like to hear from Lydia, a question that we've been asking for the last couple of days here. And it's actually the main topic of most panels and discussions that we had. What do you want to see when it comes to the energy transition globally? I'm asking you, Lydia, because you now represent actually all the youth and all the young generation that we're talking about, and that we want to hear their voices when it comes to decarbonization. So in your opinion, and from your expertise, what do you want to see done by governments, by public masses, by corporates when it comes to energy transition?
Wow, okay, that's such a huge question.
I put a lot of pressure on you
But
now.
I think it's the tough questions that we need to hear. I think it's the challenging ones, the big ones, the ones that really make us feel uncomfortable, that are going to be the ones that really make the change we want to see. So as young people and as someone that's been involved in the youth space, something that I see is very important is simply just listening and having conversations with people. When we're talking about the energy transition and sustainability and climate change, these are big, big problems. And these are big problems that don't have just one solution. And they don't have one solution for my community because the solution for someone else's community will be completely different. So given this, I think there's perhaps 3 different ways that we can look at the energy transition and what we really need to target. I think one of them is having really empowering conversations with one another. I think a lot of the times when we're talking about what's needed, we think of these big solutions and we think of something really complicated, but what about going to the seeds of it all? How about we go to the foundations and seeing what it looks like in a community that is facing storms, that is facing climate disasters year in year? What is it that they need? What is it that their communities are asking for governments to listen to them? How can we create policies that target their problems and not the other way around? Because a lot of the times we see a mismatch between what a solution is and what their true problem is. That's the first one, is talking to each other. Having a simple conversation can have so much impact, because then when we go to a COP conference in a negotiation room, or when we go to a policy-making table at our local governments, if we're able to listen to one another, share our different experiences, wherever it is that we may come from, then we can really get down to the nitty-gritty of a policy that is gonna make a change that is powerful and that it actually solves climate change. And you know, that is talking about renewable energy, it's talking about grids, it's talking about markets, it's talking about adaptation, nature-based solutions, agriculture, you name it. But the core root solution, first of all, is listening to each other and being proactive. The second one is about breaking barriers. One of them is finance. As young people, we see that it's often difficult to put our solutions into place. Through the programs that I've been in and talking about Irena's New Gen program and the Student Energy Summit that we hosted, that we had people come in with their projects of renewable energy solutions, the big problem that they come to us is, I have this idea, but I don't have the money to fund it. So how can we ensure that barriers financially are broken down so that young people and innovators and entrepreneurs can really tackle into the climate space and provide the innovation that's needed to solve a lot of the technological constraints that we're facing today? And I think the third one is about legacy. And that comes from both ways. It comes from, what do people in positions of power want to lead? What kind of legacy do they want to leave behind, and what kind of dialogue do they want to have with us? And also, what's my legacy that I want it to be? From my talk today, what is it that I want the people in the audience to take away from? And what do I want to take away from that it shapes my future programs and the future decisions that I make in the future voices that I represent? So I think there's a really great sense of responsibility embedded into this idea of legacy. When we're talking about a summit that we're creating, is what's next? What is this going to create? What projects are going to be financed? What policies are going to be implemented so we tackle the big goals that we have set? How do we ensure that the next conference we go to is not just 5 young people, but it's 500, and a large majority of them are actually from climate vulnerable communities that we give them access to? How do we ensure that with every single little project we take on, there's something that can be developed in a later future? And that's kind of something that I always think about, and I'm actually working on a documentary project, which is called Our Climate Community, which is just about that. It's about sharing not just my experiences as a young person in the climate energy space that talks to a lot of people and works in different initiatives, but it's also about talking to your neighbors, or to your parents, or to your grandparents and your teachers and everyone that perhaps isn't as invested or isn't as educated in the climate space, but nonetheless has an opinion and has a feeling when we talk about climate change. Because I think another big thing is we think of climate change as something so abstract, something so hard. So let's break it down. Let's talk to the people next to each other. Let's have those difficult conversations and bring those conversations to summits like these to negotiation tables at COPs, and to policy-making decisions at local governments. That way, we will reach the goals we need to, but by working together and listening to one another.
Majid, yes.
Thank you.
We definitely need her on a board of company, for a company. Wow, wow, that's great.
Thank you.
So what Lydia was discussing is inclusivity. And that climate change is not something that is abstract, that is an idea that we cannot really comprehend when it is actually having an impact on our daily lives, on our planet. What do you think about that, Majid? To what extent do we have enough inclusivity when it comes to fighting climate change?
Very interesting. I want to highlight the example of Dubai, actually. So I come from the Demand-Side Management Directorate at the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, and one key aspect that we focus on is the reduction of demand, the energy and water demand in Dubai by 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. And in order to do that, if you have the best systems in place, if you have done the best design of buildings, the best equipment, the best heating, cooling, ventilation, all of these equipments are the best. But you don't have the end user engaged, don't have the consumer engaged. This is where actually you don't achieve your targets. And statistically, or based on studies, you will find that end users will play a very important role in achieving our net zero targets. Actually, they can control 10% of our emissions. So if you do all of that without engaging with the end user, you're not getting the targets achieved. And what I really like, Lydia mentioned, is the role of youth that they can do in educating the public, Unfortunately, we don't have all youth as engaged as Lydia or as responsible. And I think this is what's key for us, is to instill this sense of responsibility. We need not only people that are aware, most of the people know that they have to sort their waste and they have to turn off the light, they have to set out the AC at 24 degrees, but they don't feel responsible. And this sense of responsibility is very important. And I think this is where youth can play a great role.
Do you think that it's easier to... Yes, Lydia, please go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, because I think a lot of the conversations I've been having over the past few weeks are exactly on that aspect, is why are some people, in the word you said, not being responsible? Or why do some people not care? And I think it comes down to a lot of things, but I think something that I want to mark on is that sometimes young people just don't feel empowered. Young people are not in the spaces to make a change, and they see that it doesn't matter how they talk, it doesn't matter how many places they go to, how many people they want to talk to, there's a barrier. They're not empowered. But I can provide myself as a case study of someone that has felt empowered, because I've been very privileged and very lucky to have been empowered by the UAE and their government. Right? 5 years ago, I was just 17, and I was part of the first ever Irina Youth Forum. And there we had 30 young people come and talk about renewable energy and given a youth platform to do so. Fast forward to last April, we organized the same youth forum again. Now we had 150. That's 5 times the amount of young people being in there. That's what meaningful youth engagement is. It's about providing a space that young people want to return to, that they feel listened to. And I think the UAE government does a great job and does an exemplary job. What they've done in terms of youth engagement at COP is something to look forward to and something to aspire. But that's not always the case in every single country.
Yes, true.
So as young people who don't face the realities of climate change and are empowered in a way to advocate for that, we feel a responsibility, and we need to make use of the spaces that do empower us and get people who are not empowered in their own local communities or are affected. How do we bridge that gap? And that's something that, as young people in my space, we talk about, and that's kind of what I'm advocating for today, is I'm not affected by climate change yet, but I know countless young people that are. And how can I use the time that I have on this platform today to advocate for them and get them involved? Because my voice is one voice, but it represents a lot of people, and it represents a lot of people that don't have the financing, that don't have the support that I have to make their voices heard. And as much as it is us wanting to make a difference, it's also about empowering people and making them feel empowered and listened to and a responsibility.
You highlighted something that is really critical, which is the fact that the UAE government has done so much to include the youth in decision-making, in youth conferences, in COP28, in discussions around climate change, decarbonization, in each and every aspect of business. And this is something we don't see globally. Unfortunately, we don't. And I think that the UAE government sets a very high example to when it comes to inclusivity and including the youth when we talk about climate change. What lessons do you think measured globally governments can learn from UAE experience when it comes to including the young voices in these discussions?
Definitely, there's a lot of lessons. So it starts, as I mentioned, it starts with appointing ministers. Which, you know, this is the highest level of positions that the UAE government has done. Youth councils. I've seen a lot of youth councils, you know, in the UAE, as I told you, and there's like, it also leading, when government leads by example, the private sector follows. And I think this is very important, and this is a key success in different areas the UAE government has done, you know? So it's on the energy side, on the efficiency side, but also on youth. So I really think that a key lesson learned is the importance of collaboration. And this is the open environment in the UAE to listening to other voices, to collaborating together, public sector, private sector, academia, and this platform that is offered by today is one example, you know? So collaboration is important, empowering youth is important, raising awareness is important. All of these aspects are really, really critical and can be replicated everywhere else.
So, Lydia, you are the star of this panel. So I want to wrap up. This is the last 5 minutes of this session. You are representing the young generation here in UAE. What would you like to see in the World Green Economy Summit in 2025?
That's such a big question. I would like to see more young people. I wouldn't like to be the only young person, and I wouldn't want to be the youngest person here. I am, and it's a privilege, and it's wonderful, but I think we can do more, and I think we want to do more. And me being here and having this panel front and center, that's step one. And we can't rush things. Everything has to start somewhere. And that's true, and we recognize that things take time because we want to make it as powerful as possible. So when we're talking about what next year possibly has in hand, let's continue this forward. Let's see not just young people on stage, but let's see young people out in the audience. How can we greater connect with youth networks here in the UAE and abroad so that we make the links of New York Climate Week happened a couple weeks ago, COP going forward. Let's build those connections with young people front and center. Where are young people coming from high schools, from universities, to have an experience like this, which shaped my experience and gave me a platform to do so, but let's give them the chance as well. What about people from abroad? How is this something that perhaps could be targeted, that there is a youth forum focusing on workshops and capacity buildings that Irina for sure has happened and has done so successfully that it's a core part of their identity? Is this something that maybe we can do going forward? And in a panel like this, it's so important that we talk about what youth need to be included. And we also want to have our voices shared on sessions such as agriculture and the energy transition, the nitty-gritty technology. I may not be a specialist in that area, but I can for sure tell you that there's a young person who can and who can add value. So I'm so grateful for the session we've had today because it really does make you feel energized, and it makes you see that, hey, this is just the start of it all. It's the start of a really large change that we can put forward to. So how can we work together as young people, the organizers of the World Green Energy Summit, as the partners that are here from the public and private sector? How can we use this as a springboard? And how can we ensure we leave a long-lasting legacy so that next year there's people from all generations, from all different walks of life, from all industries, in the audience, on the stage, and through workshops that really target the challenges we have. Because then we're going to have these really powerful, meaningful conversations that we're willing to have, and this is just the first step of a very long road. So I'm very excited, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity, and I look forward to what's next.
Thank you, Lydia. Majd, what would you like to see next year?
So first, they've done a brilliant job. You know, we have a panel on youth, and so I think what I would like to see is continuation of the beyond the event. You know, beyond the programs, to engaging with youth, to engaging with universities, schools. This is the right place where you can get the youth. You know, and really there are brilliant examples here in the UAE, programs that are focused on youth, you know? So I want to see more of a comprehensive program engaging with you, that engages with youth on these topics.
For me, next year, I would like to see Lydia as the moderator. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, guys.